While reading, we come to realize that Charles Dickens has a way with creating vivid images and atmospheres throughout his novel Great Expectations. Knowing about the architecture and being able to imagine what Pip's surroundings in London looked like can only add to such images. As Pip was living in the 19th century, we have entered the Victorian age, so the architecture is known as Victorian architecture. Its style is also known as Romantic Medieval Gothic. Now, Gothic architecture is known for its flying buttresses, pointed arches, and ribbed vaults. Many of these are seen in London's architecture of that time period. There are a few different types of Victorian architecture. Victorian Gothic includes many arches and pointed windows, and gingerbread lace, which is where it looks like the building is trimmed with lace. Folk Victorian is a style that was simple and plain, and it was used for common houses. The Romanesque buildings were mostly made of stone, and they were used for small private castles and large public buildings. There are a few buildings that would give the reader a general feeling for the architecture of the time and that represent many of the styles. The first building would be the Crystal Palace, designed by Joseph Paxton in 1851. It is mostly made of iron and glass, and what was very interesting about it at the time was that it was one of the first buildings to use such a vast amount of glass. It was about twice the size of St. Paul's Cathedral, and its color coordination was red, white, and blue for England. The main characteristic of the building was that it was made of several cast iron columns with glass windows in between. It was originally built in Hyde Park, later moved to Sydenham, and due to several fires and bombings, it was not able to be rebuilt. The second building is still quite famous today, St. Pancras Station. It was built from 1863 to 1866, designed by William Barlow. At the time, it was the largest enclosed area in the world. It has many pointed arches and arches in general. It gives a triangular feeling and includes pointed towers and religious connections. This is very much a Victorian Gothic building. The red brick facade became part of the Midland Great Hotel in 1865, which also has a very similar style. Another characteristic is the clock tower, which became a trend in London, and it looks like a miniature version of the Big Ben. The Big Ben was built in 1859, and it is the tallest clock tower in the world. One can see the Victorian architecture in the arches and ridges in the clock tower. The third building would be the Natural History Museum. It was built in 1881, and it represents the Romanesque and Victorian Gothic style in London. Once again, this is another building that is mostly made of stone, and you can see all the pointed arches and windows, the several triangles used, as well as the little towers. This was later renovated, but the architects tried to keep some of the general style, an original style, which is why we see many round arches relating to the Romanesque architecture in the entrance, and they also incorporated a lot of iron and glass. Another thing to point out would be its grand arches with ceiling patterns. Overall, we see several different styles in London, but they were very much connected to each other, especially by the popular arches of the time. From this, you can imagine the Gothic arches and windows twisted, peering in onto Pip through Jagger's skylight. Or imagine that Pip, in cold, dirty, and lonely London, is walking by Gothic cathedrals, the Big Ben, and St. Pancras Station on his way home.